Lynn. A little short history of our company. We were the first company in Ukraine to build a private grain elevator. And we also provided the first market for soybeans for processing. And we're very proud of that because Ukraine was not a protein self-sufficient country 20 years ago. We were involved in the pioneering stages of that, and while certain others became much larger and much more successful, somebody to my right here even, we're very proud of that. My father and I have a great love for Ukraine, and we've watched it grow. We've watched a lot of changes, a lot of positive changes. So I'd like to discuss a few things today that, well, first of all, I'd like to thank Empire State Capital Partners. You guys put on one of the best conferences in Kyiv each year. We really appreciate that. And last year I spoke on this same panel, and my feelings are very much the same as it was last year. I ended up giving a very upbeat and positive speech. I was very pro-Ukraine and very Ukrainian opportunity, very pro-Ukrainian opportunity. That changed about a half an hour before my original speech was given. We were in a situation where we had the war going on in Donbass, or in the east. We had a situation where it was a very difficult time for Ukraine government, and it was a difficult time to talk about foreign investment. Also, we'd had a year where we had not had much rain the previous summer, so it was a difficult time for us. And while I'm generally a pretty optimistic person, it was kind of tough. This year I'm going to give the speech actually that I had originally planned to give last year. And I don't know if Alex will invite me back next year or not, but there are a few things that need to be pointed out. And I won't certainly be able to touch on all of them, but there are certain things for a medium-sized producer like ourselves, farming 10,000 hectares, that we face. So I'd like to bring that to light. And I'll do that basically we were given an email based on about 5 items of particular topics that we would like to touch on. I'll kind of touch on most of those. The first issue I'd like to touch on is government of Ukraine activities to enhance Ukraine's position in the world agricultural market. Reform is never easy. It's certainly never fast. And it seems to be going in the direction of creating new income sources for the government of Ukraine. I don't know if that fits the true definition of reform or not, but certainly you can't have one without the other. No progress in the judicial system of Ukraine. This to me is fundamental. When there's no system of law or enforceable law, this is a tough time, a tough environment for foreign investment. And it's a scary time for people that are in the white business or non-black business. It's probably one of my greatest things that keep me awake at night. You've got a Verkhovna Rada, or a parliament here, that is very self-serving. It's represented by businessmen that absolutely are serving themselves or the companies that they are supported by. I don't know that their mandate should be not serving the people of Ukraine, but only themselves. And the final thing is, in this regard, is not all businessmen or all companies are required to play by the same rules as most other companies. These are the type of things that you hear about in rumors all the time. These are the type of things that concern foreign investors and donor organizations and so on. I'm going to move on now to land reform. We've been hearing about land reform for the last 12, 13 years. Now you've got the IMF trying to put demands and trying to see some progress in that regard. I'm afraid the Ukraine government will take a look at this as an opportunity for a new corruption or new profit center that seems to serve certain companies more than others. Myself, I personally have no desire. I said the same thing last year. I have no interest in owning land in Ukraine. In the United States, where I come from and where my father farmed, we had 15, 20, 30-year mortgage facilities available, cheap finance, and you had a judicial system that guaranteed once you bought something, it was going to be yours. And once you paid for it, it was going to be yours. Personally, I don't care if I rent as I currently do, or I lease from Ukrainian owners, landowners, or if it's from European banks, or Arab sheiks, or Chinese businessmen. In some regard, it may be a little bit more business-like. I may be able to get longer-term leases with foreign third parties. And that would enhance things such as capital investments, such as irrigation and so on. I'm going to be very surprised if we see a lot of progress in the land reform issue in the coming year, regardless of IMF pressure or not. I'm not an expert, I'm just giving you my opinion. Tax reform. Tax reform is an issue where, as agriculture producers, we've had the benefit, I would call it almost a subsidy, of non-payment or the VAT tax payment exemption. This has been particularly hard for us to deal with in 2016. It's here to stay. Unfortunately, it seems to be one of the main sources of the government of Ukraine's income. And it's probably not realistic to expect agriculture to carry 80 or 90% of the ball from a tax base of the country. Personally, I think governments are really only interested, or they increase only two things. That's first, taxes. Secondly, that's the size of government. Governments grow. They like to grow. That costs money. You've got new export markets was the fourth topic that was on the list that I received. We've had some progress importing into EU, but a lot of difficulties remain in place, both from the EU side as well as from the Ukrainian side. It's still not an easy process. We've been exporting soybean oil to Poland now this will be our 16th year. But that's more of a raw commodity. I would like to see a lot of attention done by a Ukraine government in regards to their relationship with the EU, letting Ukrainian products get into the EU. That would be a tremendous boost for not only Ukrainian economy, but also for tax base and for agriculture. Ukraine is becoming a significant exporter of mainly commodities, but I'm not positive that that's long-term going to be, it's a great first step, but I'm not sure that being a commodity-based economy is going to prove to be successful for decades to come. Just look at countries like Russia or the Middle East, Nigeria, Venezuela. These are countries that their economies have shrunk dramatically. Again, I'm not a macroeconomic specialist. I can read. 10 or 12 years ago, you had very little corn produced in Ukraine. Today, it's probably it's the largest export commodity from Ukraine. This is fantastic. This is something that is very good, but modern Western economies tend to get more into processing of raw commodities, corn being one of those. Ag business outlook was another item that we could discuss. The banking and finance sector in Ukraine it's in terrible shape. It's just really, there have been a lot of corruption issues, and there have been a lot of issues that the NBU has had to put in policies in place to try to stop this flight of capital. Unfortunately, a lot of that flight of capital, again, doesn't apply to certain individuals or certain companies. There's one thing that really has made the United States agricultural sector the world's greatest powerhouse in agriculture. That's reasonable finance, long-term, and that's a judicial system that works. That's what we need in Ukraine. We need access to finance, and we need a complete and total reform of the judicial system of Ukraine. And I see that as being Ukraine's greatest challenge today. My outlook, or the outlook of agricultural business in Ukraine, it's going to provide extreme difficulties, and it's become more difficult for white businesses. Like Mykola speaks of, paying $1 billion hryvnia of taxes. This is fantastic. It isn't always fun to pay a lot of taxes, and I don't think it's your main business, but it's something that this economy needs, and it's becoming difficult. I have a lot of private farmers in the areas where we're farming. I can't compete with them. They can get land that I can't get. They can buy black market pesticides, fertilizers, seeds that people steal from companies that are working in the white, and they buy for pennies on the dollar, and it's a huge problem. Ukraine is going deeper and deeper into the black, and I'm afraid a lot of the pressure for possible EU membership or IMF demands is going to drive that even deeper and even further. And it really is not going to allow Ukraine to have a place where it's a good place for investment, or where white companies have to start trying to cheat themselves. And it isn't my morality. That isn't where I'm from. I prefer to pay my taxes when I need to. I prefer to invest when I need to and where I want to. And unfortunately, I feel a lot of that slipping through the fingers or slipping through the cracks in Ukraine the last year or two. Finally, there's a question on the monitor here that's very important. Can Ukraine become an agricultural superpower or breadbasket to the world? My answer to that is in many ways it already has. As I said, Ukraine has become the 7th largest exporter of corn just in the last 10 years. They've become the largest exporter of sunflower oil, again in the last 10 years. Protein self-sufficiency, vegetable protein through soya and through good, modern animal feed has made Ukraine protein self-sufficient. But a lot of that was driven by world commodity markets, the market drove that. It wasn't necessarily the policy of Ukraine. You could argue maybe with the sunflower oil processing, they did put an export duty on sunflower export, and that's helped build the business of the oil processors. I think that's a positive thing. But it's difficult to get finance for growing sunflowers because it's not an exportable commodity. Most farmers grow corn now because it's one of their very few sources from trading companies to get finance for putting a crop in each spring, especially for medium-sized producers such as my own company. And when you had a war 2 years ago, and when you had a drought last year, it's almost an every year thing where you need to, even though, for example, our company, we've worked 4 years with the same trading company, we have to go fly to Europe every year and give our case. That's okay. That really isn't bad, but it's very difficult for a lot of small and medium-sized Ukrainian producers. They can't necessarily fly to Europe. They don't have the language skills. They're not large enough. There's a lot of issues where we need to get this finance situation, this banking sector, fixed. That again won't be an easy process, but it's really necessary. So the last thing I'd like to say is I hope that Ukraine does not go the direction of the black deeper and deeper. That's going to have to take reform seriously. Reform in banking. I don't look at land reform as being a priority, not for the next 5 years. The IMF may argue that point with me. That's fine. I'm not a pessimistic person by nature. It's really difficult for me to talk about these things, but I'm going to put it and finish this way. It's more a question to the Ukraine government and to the Ukraine people. I'm a guest in Ukraine. We've worked here 25 years. I work on Ukrainian land as a guest. I'm a foreign investor. I should have some say because I pay taxes, but I certainly shouldn't have all the say. Ukraine government has to say to itself, are we really here to make Ukraine a better place? Maybe that's European integration, maybe it isn't, but we need to address a lot of things. And when I talk about Ukraine, I don't mean those 3,000 or 4,000 people that seem to have a different set of rules. They need to ask the people that they represent, and the people need to say, we'd like a change. We'd like to go back to getting normal salaries. We'd like to see investment in processing plants. We'd like the rural economy to see normal roads and normal schools and to have jobs. And it's not a question for me to answer. All I'm doing is pointing out maybe some issues that face us as a small or medium-sized company. The Ukraine people really need to ask themselves this, and I think they did 18 months or 2 years ago. They said, we're tired of this. And I don't think that the people that are representing them today are listening anymore to the populace. And to me, that's, this country it's a rich country. It has so much potential. Myself, as a white business-type businessman, I absolutely want to continue to work the way that I was raised. I want to continue to not plan on ways to cheat or to do things or to not report my yield or to report income. I don't mind paying my fair share, but I certainly don't want to be the 10 or 15% that's doing that, because I'll be extinct soon. And that is kind of the direction that Ukraine has to ask itself, are we really willing to go down that dark path? And I can't answer it. I love Ukraine. I'm very optimistic about Ukraine's future. I think it comes a little slower and with a lot more pain than we maybe had all hoped 25 years ago. But this is a fantastic place, and I really would like to see it go in a direction where people, whether you're a foreigner or whether you're a tourist or an investor or Ukrainian, I'd like to see where this is a place where people talk about it in a positive light. Thank you.